Welcome to Nerd Stop, your one-stop shop for all things nerd.
What's up, nerds, and welcome to Nerd Stop. My name is Josh, and today I'm joined by my two sensual co-hosts, Michael.
Hi there.
And Spencer.
Eater, hoder, hi dear.
So before we get into today's topic, I just want to give a shout-out to the Lagging Balls podcast. They featured an email I sent to them on one of their recent podcasts, and they gave us a shout-out. So again, just want to say thanks to them. And also, if you're not watching the Overwatch League, you should definitely do it. And moving on. So today we're going to be talking about tabletop RPGs. In general, we'll probably get into a little bit more other tabletop games too if they hit our fancy. But we're going to try and stick with the RPGs, like Dungeons & Dragons, Savage Worlds, Call of Cthulhu, stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead. I'll throw it over to Spencer.
You mentioned Savage Worlds. That's probably my favorite system. I mean, I have a lot of experience, with you guys, actually, playing 4.5, 3.5. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Lots of 3.5. Love 3.5. But when I got back, when I led my group, like I was the DM for a little while when I had a group when I was back in Texas. And what I really liked about Savage Worlds is we had a larger party. We had like 7 people at one point. And Savage Worlds is like a really more fast-paced system. So I really enjoyed being able to get combat through, really quick and easy with a large group. And even have like extra players that they were kind of doubling up and playing these minor characters as well at the same time. So it ended up pretty epic. And the cool thing about Savage Worlds is, with D&D 3.5 and I'm sure 5th edition too, you are kind of sort of limited with what you get, and then what you have to do if you want to kind of go kind of outside the normal fantasy realm, you really have to homebrew a lot, and everything can end up really wonky. But in the Savage Worlds, you are able to really go really kind of off map really easily, and things work out. Like the favorite game that I had that I ran with that was I told everyone roll up a character of a 101st Airborne on D-Day. I told them we're going to be playing a straight through, no nonsense, like a Band of Brothers type game. But they show up in Normandy. They find a bunch of equipment that they had lost. They fight a couple Germans, and then next thing you know, they find themselves transported into this fantasy world where technology is from all these other. It's like a crossroads of different universes, and like war time, they all got transported over there, so it ended up being just a really cool game with muskets versus the M1919s, and we all had a lot of fun with it. So that's why I like Savage Worlds. But I think I probably should have started with how these games started. I mean, we're how far are we from Lake Geneva right now? With Gary Gygax, the father of fantasy gaming, is not far from here, and that's a tribute we could talk to. And in fact, Mike, I think you're more into D&D now, so you're probably the one to talk to about more Dungeons and Dragons right now.
Yeah, man. I mean, D&D for me is something that video games just can't touch on because of, how do I say this? Because of the way that you can play D&D, because of the way that you're able to insert yourself into D&D and do more creative things, there's so many possibilities that I haven't seen a game or a video game that can come close to it. For example, I'm playing D&D 5th edition right now with a group, and I'm playing a Dragonborn whose backstory was that he was a sorcerer, and he ended up leaving because he was kind of ostracized by his clan because his clan were just farmers. So he grew up as a farmer, mostly growing wheat and shit. So long story short, we're in a cave. I see that there's a bunch of like hay and like dust around, so on and so forth. And there's an ogre and a couple of goblins and a bunch of orcs sitting in there. So I asked my DM, I'm like, hey, I can throw fireballs. And because I grew up on a farm, I understand that fire and hay don't mix. So can I give this a shot? Rolled a nat 20, threw a fireball, hit a haystack, caused a hay explosion and dust explosion, killed like 4 things, set a bunch of people on fire, like all sorts of just crazy shit because of my character's in-game knowledge. And it was on a whim. And that's the thing that appeals to me so much, because that kind of stuff doesn't happen in video games unless it's specifically designed in. And I mean, there were 150 other things I could have done But just because I was like, hey, I think I can do this, it makes sense
Hey,
scientifically, so on and so forth. Yeah, it's those little things in D&D that make D&D so fun to me. Another example is I have a spell called Dust Devil, where it's just, a little Dust Devil. And I threw it out, was beating people up with it, and then some guy threw a flame sphere at it, and it turned into a fire tornado. Just those cool little interactions that you just can't get a ton of in video games really makes D&D something that keeps pulling me back.
Remember when we were in I think it was high school, and we were sitting in the room where I am, not where I'm sitting now, sitting around playing D&D. I had you all going through a sewer for one reason, and Mike, there's some kind of encounter coming up, and Mike goes, "Hey, I'm gonna fireball that guy." I'm like, "Are you sure?" He goes, "Yeah."
Okay, wait.
Okay.
It was a flame sphere.
Fine. Flame sphere, okay. And you're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it." I'm like, "Okay, so you're in a sewer, an active sewer. You will send this fireball or flame sphere, and all of you roll for lots of damage."
Yeah.
Like,
Probably
you
wasn't
blew
the best
us
idea.
up, destroyed the city, and lit the surrounding forest on fire. Congrats.
You have a lot.
Well, I mean, that's a great thing about tabletops, though, is that the entire adventure, like with a video game, obviously there is something that the developers wanted you to do. They had a path that they want you to take, and they have a story that they want to tell you. Whereas with D&D or just tabletop RPGs in general, it's more based around the player. The player is making decisions to go to certain places, and the story has to adapt to what the players do. So it's a completely player-driven experience, as opposed to a game being a developer-driven experience.
Well, that's the way it should be. That's not always the way it plays out. Being a dungeon master and being a player, I try to avoid railroading so hard, and I really don't like it when I get railroaded. But sometimes, sometimes you have one player that wants to veer left when everyone wants to go right, and it's not fair to the rest of them to follow this one person's whim and make it all about them because they're going away from it. But for the most part, there is a lot of freedom, and it's a hard balance to do as a dungeon master. But it can end up being so much fun. Like I have another quick, I'm probably gonna have a few stories about cool adventures here. But I was dungeon mastering once, and I was in kind of an low fantasy gunpowder era, like early 17th century kind of deal, late 17th century. So there was this forest water mill that was taken over by bandits, and when you have a dark forest water mill, they tend to be pretty much small fortresses because they're out there in the woods by themselves. So instead of what I did was I designed this mill. I designed this area around it. And then I let them figure it out. I didn't. I just designed every detail of this: the gate over the water, how it went through, the spikes on top of the walls, where the patrols would be. I just set this up, and I let them figure it out. Now, the players that I was playing with, I absolutely loved what they did, and this is why I love playing with them. They went into town, and they bought a whole bunch of kegs of gunpowder. But the thing about that mill was it had this big area around it that was cleared out. So they couldn't just sneak in there. So what they decided to do was go to the hog farm next. And they trained these hogs. They would throw food against a wall, and then the hogs would charge up and try to get the food. So they strapped these barrels of gunpowder to these hogs. They lit one, used a small little hand jerry-rigged catapult to throw food against the wall. The pigs ran up and exploded. And I set the scene when they charged through the breach there made by these suicide bombing pigs of there being bacon falling from their singed hair and pork falling from the sky, and they fought their way through it, and we all had a damn good time. It's all about the player. I agree.
Bomb pigs.
Bomb pigs.
Bomb pigs. And yeah, I mean, with that whole player-driven experience thing, it is the whole game you pick, too, like whatever game you want to play. That's also another choice that's made by all the players, and including the DM, obviously. I include him with the list of players, even though he's not a player character, but it's all the people actually playing the game, And one of my favorite game tabletop RPGs out there is Call of Cthulhu, and if you've never played it, I definitely recommend playing it. It's very different from any other tabletop RPG I've played. With like Dungeons and Dragons, you play the hero. You're this great champion doing all these great and heroic deeds, and pretty much the world revolves around you. I imagine it's probably the same with Savage Worlds, depending on the campaign you're playing. But in Call of Cthulhu, based off of H.P. Lovecraft, very cosmic horror, cosmic nihilism, the game doesn't care about the player at all. As a matter of fact, the player, like, you're not known as a hero. Like, your player characters are known as investigators. And it's not uncommon for, like, at the drop of a hat, a player to drop dead or go insane, and that's it for that character. Just because they are so weak, and combat's not a big thing about it. Like, a lot of times, you playing that game as a player character, you try to kind of work your way around combat, because combat itself is very difficult, especially if you start facing off against different cosmic horrors. Like, even against other people, it becomes a difficult thing to do. So, I mean, that's another thing. Like, you can pick a game based off of how you want to play. You can be this great hero in Dungeons and Dragons, or you can be this raving madman that isn't going to be able to do anything in Call of Cthulhu. And I guess while we're kind of talking about that, I kind of want to talk about different mechanics in these games too, just because I know that they're all so different.
Oh yeah.
Whereas with Call of Cthulhu, we use a D100 system, so all your stats are based off of 1 to 99 pretty much. There's no point in going to 100, just based off of the way that the rolling system works. But every action you take, you have to roll a D100 for it. And for those of you not versed with dice, there is a 100, not a 100-sided die, but there's two different types of D10s. There's a D10 that has 0 through 9, and then there's another type of D10, which is considered a D100, just by itself, and it has 00 through 90 on it, but then you roll it with an additional D10, the whole 0 through 9, or 1 through 9, just to get that, 1 through 10, just to get the whole range of numbers. But you roll all those. A 1 is considered like a nat 20 in Dungeons and Dragons. You roll a 1 and you succeeded like fantastically. Something great is going to come out of what you just did. So with Call of Cthulhu, you want a lower number because it's based off of percentages. So like you could have a 50-something in small arms, so like pistols and other weapons like that. So you have to roll below that number or below, and anything above it is considered a fail. That's why there's no reason to go past 99 on there, because rolling 100 is an automatic failure in Call of Cthulhu. It's also a very story-driven based game too. Not a whole lot of action. As a matter of fact, when I've run campaigns for D&D, I've never used any miniatures. I use very minimal maps just to show people the layout of buildings, because it's all kind of try to like invoke it just by telling a story. And I'll describe kind of like when combat does happen, I'll describe the distances from these people, or I'll describe the room and how they're moving about, and I'll have the players describe to me what we're doing. So just together we're building this story, and it's just an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing like how that game actually works.
Yeah, it's a mass hallucination. You know, everyone's got the same image in their head. Yeah, I've gone away from miniatures as well. Especially playing Savage Worlds, there are rules set for Savage Worlds on how to use miniatures, but they kind of take away from the way that the system is supposed to work, because the whole thing about Savage Worlds is fast, furious fun. There's just like Call of Cthulhu, the combat can be really limited. You can play full, combat, but not a lot. I like to play it a lot of story driven. I'll have a couple of combat sequences mixed in with a lot more actual role playing, and that's a lot more fun to do, I found. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people want to win in combat, but it's more fun when you're fighting big combats, a few big combats, instead of constantly having little ones and having a bunch of story in between. So the way that I'll give you examples of kind of big combats that I've had using Savage Rolls in a minute, but the way the basic system works is you have, first initiative is cards, a regular deck of playing cards with the jokers in, and that's your initiative. And if you know what card's higher than another, then you can figure out how the initiative works, and then aces and jokers are better for you. Then it's not a D20, it's not a D100, it's actually a die type. So say your strength will be a D4, your perception a D6. I don't actually have a sheet in front of me, so I can't list off the actual attributes. But all your skills, your shooting will be, it's a die type, and a 4 is a success. A 4 is always a success. You double that, and it's a advance or ace. Yeah, forget the verbiage for it, but it's essentially a crit. So that makes everything just really quick. You don't have to ask what's the goblin's AC. You generally know you're aiming for a 4, and then damage is derived after that. And it's actually the damage. You don't have hit points. You have hero players, or wild cards will have essentially 3 hits they can take, and the mooks, the minor little characters, the extras, have 1. And then after that, they're knocked out. So you have some really fast, furious, deadly combat. So I had during that World War II paratroopers in a fantasy world game that I played. They were in this goblin dungeon, and it was straight Mines of Moria. You know, all of a sudden the goblins just started coming out of everywhere, and then the whole group just sat down their M1919, pulled out their Thompsons and their M1 Grands and their BARs, and just went to town. And I actually ended up, being able to figure out each goblin that was hit, despite there being a couple, just near 100 of them, I swear, just getting wiped out as they charged. And it was a really intense combat. And at the end, I'm hoping the players, felt like they'd actually achieve something. Fast, furious fun. I really love the Savage World system for that, and I also really like how much it rewards and lets you roleplay.
See, and that's where I actually I stand a little bit apart from you guys, because I like the slower pace, drawn out kind of strategic take that you often find yourself in Dungeons and Dragons, especially when the class system and spell system of Dungeons and Dragons is so variable. I mean, sometimes you can find yourself, God forbid, a full party of sorcerers.
There's ways to make that fun, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, but
we are a heavy metal band.
But I mean, it's cool when you've got a paladin, and a cleric, and a ranger, and a bard, and a sorcerer, and a wizard, and you have to plan out like, okay, well, we want to make sure the sorcerer and the wizard aren't going to get one shot because they're most likely going to be doing the most damage or controlling the battlefield. You're going to have the fighter who just goes nuts and tanks stuff. You're going to have a barbarian who literally goes nuts and just rips someone to shreds. And planning that out and thinking about how you're going to attack things and how you're going to go about doing things and forcing yourself into this kind of strategy game as opposed to just an RPG is really fun to me, especially when it comes to like epic encounters, like fighting a dragon. Because I mean, like, you roll initiative, and you're sorcerer, and you roll a 20, and you're ahead of everyone. I'm like, okay, I'm not attacking first. I'm not drawing attention to myself, so I'm just going to turn into a barrel.
Well, Mike, you're the bane of my existence when I do that.
Yeah, I am.
Because you are a min-max. And I think this is you are probably one of the reasons I like Savage Worlds so much, is because it's really, really hard to min-max in Savage Worlds. It's actually designed to stop that. But I'll have to remember that you enjoy that, because I plan on doing a campaign of essentially Space Vikings here in the near future, and I'll just have to make sure to give you the opportunity to be tactical and plan out your assault. So, but you won't be able to min-max by class, but have the sniper find somewhere and the guy who's just going to rip heads off up front, things like that. I'll give you the opportunity to be tactical, but you can't min-max Savage Worlds.
A good example of how I play is I like to be, you'll find like a lot of sorcerers and wizards, or the DPS classes, you'll find a lot of people who just, I want to do a lot of damage. Whereas I like to control the battlefield and just fuck with stuff. So I mean, I'm the guy who'll sit back and cast like Major Illusion and make somebody think that they're covered in spiders. Or I'll use I'll just create a noise in the background to distract them so we can set something up. Those little things where I really put myself into the battle and I'm sitting there thinking, as opposed to just like, how do I win this RPG? I'm thinking, okay, as my character, as how I've set up my character, my backstory, so on and so forth, what would I actually do in this situation? And I feel like you can't do that as much in more fast-paced things. You don't have the time to really do that. I think they're both fun, but I love being a blue mage from Magic in every game I play.
Yeah.
Control, conquer, fuck with people.
All right, so speaking of you being the bane of my existence as a DM, being a dungeon master is flippin' hard, but it is really rewarding. I've learned things over time, little tips that I'd love to give to any wannabe or fledgling dungeon master. One, make every session, every encounter hard enough to kill everybody, but then reel it back as you go. We don't want to be Gary Gygax here. We're not trying to murder a party of 12. It has to be challenging. Another little tip to make things challenging is so say you've got 6 people fighting a dragon. Okay, that's challenging. I mean, it's a dragon, but there's 6 of us. Now imagine 6 people fighting 6 enemies that are roughly equal their strength. Now, dang, that's pretty darn hard. You're gonna have to pair it off. You're gonna have to rely on each other. That's difficult. Now imagine 6 people versus 12 enemies that are half of each of those 6's strength. Then everyone goes nuts and they think they're about to die. It's
swarm
not about
birds, dude.
Huh?
So the swarm of birds. The swarm of birds will always kill you.
Yeah, the swarm of vampire squirrels will take you out. And always, as a little player tip, speaking of vampire squirrels, don't piss off the DM. Because if you take something and you just take advantage of it, because a big thing about a DM is find something, whatever your players are abusing, and take that shit away from them. And when that's good, and what's better is if you turn it against them. So say
I can hear the malice against me in your voice right now.
So say you have a druid that likes to figure out what's going on in the countryside around him, just scout out everything that could possibly be coming up by talking to the local fauna. You know how you deal with him talking to squirrels? Vampire squirrels. Have the party almost get wiped because he talked to the wrong squirrel. So the creative element is one of my favorite things about it. There's a lot of tips for DM. Read there's a guide, Dungeon Master for Dummies, and you can find a lot of things about how to create it. And the main thing, my main issue as a DM is trying to prepare too much, because I'm actually okay at flying by the seat of my pants. But what I really like to do is plan ahead, get all these things set up, and 2 things are going to happen. One, either I'm going to run out of time because I have a busy life and I'm not going to have something prepared for the next session. Or 2, everyone's going to shit on it and destroy the entire session that I planned by going off the rails. And then I'm not going to tell them, no, you can't do this if it's reasonable. So it goes out the window and I end up flying by the seat of my pants as it is. So find the balance between over-preparing and under-preparing. You have to have the general direction ready. Have interesting characters in your bag. In your bag. Wisconsin. Have interesting encounters ready to go. Have the planet, the dungeon, everything they're going to be in, but be ready for a left turn. Don't over-prepare and have these cool things that are never going to happen because the players want to do something else.
I definitely agree with you there on the whole preparedness thing, because I've DM'd for Call of Cthulhu campaigns before, but my whole philosophy is I prepare almost absolutely nothing. I prepare story parts, bits of the story. I prepare clues and everything like that, and story beats, but how the players get there is kind of up to them. I'm definitely going to work on guiding them there, or if I see them not going in a direction you are completely and utterly missing what I'm going for, I'm going to insert another NPC to try and lead them back. But I'm still, because Call of Cthulhu, it's a different game than what Dungeons and Dragons or Savage Worlds is, because every adventure, it's an investigation. Your player, it's kind of like an episode of Supernatural, except Sam and Dean will actually die.
Die and not come back, mind you.
Yeah, exactly. Die and not come back. So you kind of gotta you have to make sure that they see those clues. Otherwise, they're going to be running around in circles forever, and they're never going to see all the cool occult shit that you planned. They're never going to get taken by some ancient brotherhood via some sort of teleportation spell and go insane once they go through there because they're just like, what the fuck, we were standing in Arkham and now we're in some crazy golden temple or something like that. So for me, like, I don't know, I don't prepare a whole lot. Another thing I like to do as a DM is I like to set the atmosphere. So I've had a couple of albums of music that are just ambient noise, and they're kind of like almost like asylum sounds and stuff like that. There's people screaming and cackling evilly, and I'll play that in the background as I'm DMing, just because I think it sets the atmosphere for the campaign that I'm doing.
Turn off the lights, light some candles.
Exactly. I actually did a one-off once where it took place on a submarine. The players got teleported to this submarine in the middle of the Cold War, and it was a Russian submarine. And what I did was I turned off all the lights. And if you've ever been on like a naval vessel before, at nighttime or when it's dark, it's nothing but red lights throughout the entire building, or throughout the entire ship. So people are still able to sleep, but the people that are on night shift are still able to see. So I turned off all the lights, and the only light we had was red light in the entire room. And then we just started the adventure from there, and it was awesome. It set up the atmosphere.
That's really cool. 10 out of 10 would sit in on that game.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just a lot of fun stuff you can do with Call of Cthulhu. I like making up like fun scenarios. Like if at any point my players get split up, like if I have a party of 4, let's say, and 2 players go one way and 2 players go the other way, while these 2 players are doing their actions, I kick the other players out of the room because they're not going to know what's going on. Mm-hmm. They're not in contact with each other, so it kind of adds that whole, what am I trying to say, that element of realism where like these players don't know what's going on, so obviously they're not here. Why would I have them here so they can metagame? Or if they are the submarine one, they were able to get walkie-talkies and they ended up splitting up. So I sent the party to different sides of the house and everything like that, and they would communicate everything via walkie-talkie.
Wow.
It was a really fun thing.
Yeah, one of the fun things that I did on a game that kind of, we played, 2 sessions, and it ended up failing because school ended up stressing me out, and anyway. Yeah. So what I did was I actually took this off of the Frostgrave game that Will Wheaton ran on kind of a offshoot of Tabletop. What he did was he had the players all have their own secret, and then have a secret that they shared with another player. So I kind of had everyone have their own goals and their own relationships to other characters that the other players didn't know about. Now, that was hard to manage, and it, again, didn't go anywhere because I were really just starting out, but it's something that I'd like to try to do again. Have a little party intrigue in there, maybe hopefully not to the point of being destructive, but a little party intrigue is always nice, because the main fun of role-playing games is the party. It's the group. It's you have all these different minds working together to solve these problems, and you have different personalities, and sometimes that can end up kind of bad. I've had players walk out of games because, I think they were being shitbags, but I don't know. But the party dynamic is just the whole fun of it.
There has to be good chemistry. Like, yes. The party doesn't necessarily have to agree with one another, but there has to be good chemistry in the party. There shouldn't just be some chaotic evil dude doing all this evil crap when the rest of your campaign's lawful evil or lawful good. That chemistry is just not going to work.
What I had once, the one time that I really had a player just walk out, he finished that session but never came back. Everyone is kind of playing a little bit selfish. They all had their own goals. This was actually, again, during that Savage Worlds World War II Paratrooper one. Everyone kind of had their own goals. They were out for themselves, more or less, but they all wanted to work together towards the same goal, because working together with all this technology and skills that no one else had was a great way for each one of them to become far more powerful. And they all worked together great, except for one guy who wanted to be a Gary Lou. And he would stop encounters because he wanted to peacefully talk to these people, and just do these ridiculous, like, true lawful good things when everyone else was chaotic or lawful neutral at best. And I thought that was a really cool party dynamic to have everyone just kind of out for themselves, not quite evil, not quite good, and different levels of that with each one. But you had the one guy had to be perfect good, and it just shit on everything. He always wanted to turn left when the whole group was turning right, and it was bad. So yes, absolutely, party dynamic is essential, and that's an interesting one because most of the time the party dynamic is everyone wants to be Gary, Lou, and Larry and Mary Sue, but then you have the one guy who wants to just be a dick.
Just be a
on
edgelord.
that, though, sometimes it is really fun when you have, especially in D&D, when you have, somebody who's, lawful good or lawful evil, and you have those warring dynamics in the group. It can lead. Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, if it's done right, it can be really fun and also really funny. If you've got a lawful good paladin and then you also have a necromancer, like that's some funny banter that goes on.
That's a good cop, bad cop. But I mean, as long as it doesn't impede the actual story and impede the game, where people aren't having fun with it.
There are ways to make. You can make everything work if it's done correctly, and sometimes it's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's just the chemistry.
Yeah, first of all, those two players should hopefully like each other, because the number of bad things that could happen there is, I mean, they could end up trying to kill each other, they'd end up fighting at every corner, and even if they're just playing their characters and they're not really fighting, they're still arguing at every corner, and that's not productive to anyone. Yeah. And you have the lawful good Gary Sue, who is ignoring all logic to be Superman over here, and then you have chaotic stupid on the other side. You have Snidely Whiplash. That can be a horrible dynamic. But I agree with you. Having the mix, having a little salt with your sugar, can be awesome, but it's very difficult. And one of the things
go ahead.
One of the things that I'm kind of have this idea for a game in my head for a campaign. Hopefully my school schedule and work schedule coming up will work so I can get that going. But because I know the two people, and Mike here and Keeley is going to be another player, I know the two of you, and hopefully we can get another player too. But I want to actually, with the Space Vikings idea, I want to kind of go off of Stargate and have a world where aliens have influenced ancient cultures with, these gods really exist and they just influence the culture, you know what I mean? It's really iffy about going into it because you enter religion, especially real-world religions, into this game, and you're it's going to be difficult. So, but because both of you know me and I know you guys, I feel like that's something we could do and have fun with without getting shitty. And that's another thing that is hard to do. They can end up being really satisfying, but there's LARPers. Actually, most LARPing organizations refuse any kind of religious symbol, even if it's an entirely fictional, even if it's Sigmar. They completely don't allow it because they want to avoid religious freakouts.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the southern Wisconsin one, or northern Illinois, one of the two, I forget which one. I was reading their thing because I wanted to get into it at one point, and they said absolutely no religious stuff, even fictional, because they want to avoid people getting pissy at each other. So that's another part of a dynamic that can be really hard, is when you bring in the real life stuff,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so before we go into final thoughts, I just want to talk about games that we recommend people playing. So let's go ahead. We'll start with Mike first.
I mean, obviously, I'm just going to go with D&D. Right off the bat, D&D can be...
Yeah, that's the question. What edition?
I would honestly say 5th. I am having a lot of fun with 5th edition.
Yeah, I haven't tried 5th edition, but I'm a 3.5 purist.
Yeah, 3.5 is fantastic.
3.5 to the core.
5th has been great so far. I'm really enjoying it. Combat seems a little bit easier. I feel that 5th edition is a lot more new player friendly. So if you're looking to get into it, if it's something you've ever wanted to try, 5th edition to me is the easiest thing to pick up and go. And it may seem a little intimidating at first, But, just watch a video on YouTube, read the book, and you can have a lot of fun.
Okay. For me, I definitely recommend, if you're tired of feeling like the hero and you just want to get stomped on by some cosmic horror, I definitely recommend Call of Cthulhu. Especially if you're getting kind of like wore out on games that are very combat focused. Just give it a go. And it'll bring, like, when you do have that combat, it is going to be exhilarating, because the first time you go into combat in that game, you are going to realize how fragile your player character is. And it's just an exciting moment when you finally do overcome combat, even against, like, some street thug, because you could have died. And then also this little indie game called Dread. It's, because I'm a big horror fan, if you can't tell. It's essentially a dead game. It came out a couple years ago, but
it's not dead. It's just not in publication, but it's still definitely
it has a fan base, but it's not public. Like, it's not published anymore. You can find the books online for free in a PDF format, but it's essentially like a bunch of different scenarios that you go through, and you're kind of telling a story, and it's based off of like this Jenga tower. So during a tense moment, you're going to have a player pull one of their blocks out from the Jenga tower, and eventually this thing is going to get nice and wobbly, and the tension is just going to build up and build up and build up until either the person that's running the story concludes the game, or it climaxes with some catastrophic disaster, a.k.a. Jenga!
Yeah, and either that could be the whole group dying, or maybe just one person, or something horrible happening. They put it on tabletop, and oh boy, did it look fun. I mean, I'm not even into horror, and I thought that would be so cool. And it's not even necessarily horror either. It's suspenseful. It's so suspenseful. Anytime you want to have like a quick, a lot of times they're one-offs. They're a one-sitting couple hours. If you want to have a tense role-playing experience, Dread is awesome. Go download it, try it out. All you need to do is read the basic rules, think up a story, and off you go. Oh, so cool.
All right, and then Spencer, what about you? Any games you recommend?
Well, of course, I'll recommend Savage Worlds, of course, because I like the creative, the ability to do pretty much anything I want as a dungeon master, and be able to create the worlds that I want. It could be sci-fi, it could be fantasy, it could be modern, and everything will be a lot of awesome role-playing opportunities. The combat will be fast, furious, fun. Truly enjoy it, truly recommend it, and they have extra books that are weird World War II, which I think is cool, weird Rome, Deadlands, like a Western sci-fi, Western horror type thing. Awesome, and that's only scratching the surface of what you can get there. But another one that actually I thought of just recently, just during this conversation, thought about that I'm actually looking forward to playing. I think it might be published, or I think it might be on its way to publishing, I forget, but it's called Pugmire. And if you want a light-hearted, fun RPG, Pugmire is great. All of the players play dogs. And, yeah, and they're anthropomorphic dogs, and your class is, your race as a dog determines what kind of, there's different, you're not each species or breed of dog is not listed, but there's herder, guardian, toy, things like that. They all have their different stats based on that. And I haven't read the book yet because I'm not even 100% sure it's out yet, but I've been reading previews of it for sure. And it looks great for just a bunch of people that want to have your Mike. You play a bulldog, and I'd play a Cairn Terrier, and I don't know what kind of Josh and dog would be. Let's see. If Josh was a dog, bull terrier.
The laziest dog.
I think Josh should be a bull terrier. But and I think that's just
I don't know
really
what that's supposed to mean.
Patton's dog was a bull terrier.
Oh, okay, I'll take that.
There you go. But I just I'm looking forward to playing that in the future, because it's fun for all ages, and it's just a really cool thing to do. And that's the thing. Don't have to
bark the entire time.
And you give the opportunity to bark. And actually, that's part of the game, is when there's evil spirits nearby, that they bark at it. They can see things that the humans, and like humans are gods, because it's after humans wipe themselves out somehow, and it's in the future where dogs and cats have grown. They've become sentient, truly sentient, and the main quests usually involve finding pieces of technology. Like finding a flashlight is a huge deal. It's a magical item, and humans are revered as the masters. And it's just so it's cool, man. It's cool. I'm looking forward to it. But Savage Worlds,
Pugmire sounds fun.
I can't wait to get my hands on it and just design a fun 4-legged romp. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of funny that you mentioned the weird Rome for Savage Worlds, because Call of Cthulhu kind of has like the same thing. They have a Vietnam era Call of Cthulhu rulebook. They have modern era Call of Cthulhu rulebook. They have Cthulhu by Gaslight, which is like Victorian era, and then they have Cthulhu Invictus, which is the Cthulhu mythos but in ancient Rome. So I thought it was just a cool little parallel. And then also, is Fast Furious Fun, is that their catchphrase?
Yeah.
Okay, because you said it like 20 times this episode.
Yeah, it's their design. I want to say motto. There's it's statement of intent. They want to be Fast Furious Fun, and they achieve it. It's if you play it the way it's written, and it's quick and it's fun. I love it. Doesn't take a lot of work. The downside, here. Let me talk about some downsides with Savage Worlds a little bit. It feels shallow. Now, I'm used to 3.5. I've played a lot of 3.5, and there's a lot of depth in your character creation, and your numbers, in your stats, and your having to know last year's tax return in order to calculate your magic missile. But that's AD&D, but never mind. But Savage Worlds, the character sheet's light because you're using die types. It's kind of like there's hindrances and not feats, but I forget the word for it. But there's negative and bonuses that you have as a character, and some of those negatives and bonuses that are in the rulebook are purely role playing. They don't affect your stats whatsoever. You just role play them. So that game is designed for role playing. Therefore, if you have two sheets in front of you, you have your actual character sheet with your stats, and you have your bio and things that have happened over the course of the campaign. Your bio and things that have happened to you are going to be far more important than your actual character sheet. Some people, like the way Mike likes to play, might not necessarily appreciate that.
All right. So we'll go ahead and roll into our final thoughts. I think we got about 5 minutes left. So we'll go ahead. We'll throw it over to Spencer first for final thoughts.
Okay, I'm going to steal this from Will Wheaton. Play more games! There's always people interested in it. If you ask around, you're going to, hey, do you want to play a tabletop RPG with me? Depending on where you're working, who's around you, you might get some weird comments, maybe asinine comments. But you will find people. There are people out there that want to play games, and they may not necessarily be the one to instigate. They might not want to ask, but if you offer, they're like, honestly, yeah, I've always thought about it. And have a good experience. Play some games with them. Get closer as, friends. I mean, I've talked about in the first episode, playing Dungeons & Dragons or Warhammer 40K with the guys that I worked with got me a lot closer to them than I was before. Playing with you two Dungeons & Dragons in high school and middle school, that was really cool. So by all means, if you haven't tried them yet, if you've thought about it, there's so many rule sets out there now, and a lot of them are quick and easy to learn. Like Dread is it's so easy. It's you have to have someone that tells a good story, but past that, it's all so easy to get into. So just give it a shot.
All right, Mike?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing as Spencer. You really don't know how much fun you can have until you just give it a shot, and tabletop RPGs are just a shitload of fun.
Yeah. I mean, even if you
shitload,
metric shit ton. Yeah, I mean, even if you're new to it, even if you don't play a lot of tabletop games, and you can still find ways to have fun with it. And the bad thing is, what I hear a lot is, I tried it once with a experienced party, and then they were kind of crappy to me, and I never played again. I've heard that so many times, and I'll admit, like when I was playing with that one guy who was that Gary Liu, I probably could have worked with him more, and we could have been nicer to him and try to keep him. And we weren't the best there. I kind of regret that. But just try to not be a dick to people who are just getting into it. You know, they want to have fun too, and don't expect them to pick everything up right away. And be nice to the players. The more people that play this, the more companies will come out with new things, and the more people, more resources will be available to you, and the more people you have to play with. So play more games, and don't be a dick. There we go. That's my words.
Yeah, those are two Will Wheaton things.
I don't know. I didn't know he said don't be a dick.
Oh, he says it all the time.
Oh, he does. Oh, you're right.
Yeah. My final thoughts are definitely, if you are even remotely thinking about playing a tabletop RPG, or you know what, just a tabletop game in general, doesn't even have to be an RPG, just do it. There is literally nothing to lose except for, I guess, your time. What else? And if you are that experienced player and you're getting those new players, just don't be a dick, man. It's this guy's or gal's first or second time playing this game. Work with them. I'm sure you didn't know all the 3.5 forward and backward the first time you played it. So, on that note, I think we're going to end the show. Again, just a couple of announcements. I just want to, again, thank Lagging Balls for giving us a shout-out on their podcast. It was really great of them, and they gave us some really good advice for us to keep moving forward with. And shortly in the future, too, I want to get us on iTunes and Google, the Google Play Store. That's what it's called. Just to hear any news about that, I'll post it on our Twitter as soon as we are able to get ourselves on iTunes and on Google Play. So just go ahead, follow our Twitter. The details will be at the end of the show after we sign out. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and say, see you next week, nerds. Hey nerds, one last thing. We want you guys to contribute to this podcast by sending in your questions or topics to discuss. And when I say questions, I mean any question about anything. You can reach us on Gmail at nerdstoppdc@gmail.com or on Twitter at nerdstoppod. Thanks for listening. Thank you for choosing Nerdstop. Have a nice day.